Book 2 Chapter 1. Are you sure about this, Dan? Croc asked, not even attempting to conceal the worry in its voice. Because me? I have concerns. I told you about Fritz, right? German fella. Very polite. He was also a mite headstrong and overconfident. Wouldn't listen to me either. The rubbery blue dog offered me a sidelong glance with its oversized googly eyes. Might be a few parallels between Fritz and a certain Delver whose name may or may not rhyme with Mon. You're very obviously just talking about me, I said, never looking away from the kiosk. It sat beside a pair of motionless escalators, which connected to the upper level of the vast shopping mall that comprised the third floor. No, I never actually said it was you, Croc replied with a sniff. So maybe that's just your conscience's way of saying listen to Croc because he is a good boy and people should really listen to him more, so they don't die horrifically in easily avoidable accidents. I rolled my eyes. Fine, remind me what happened to Fritz? Was he the guy who had his limbs ripped off or the one who got turned into meat slurry? It's hard to keep track, considering how high your body count is. Hey, that's not fair, Dan. The dog, who wasn't really a dog, sounded genuinely wounded. You know I didn't intentionally kill any of those Delvers. And, for the record, maybe they wouldn't be dead if they'd listened to me. Like Fritz, who had his face eaten off by sentient ant cream, which then proceeded to crawl into his lungs and lay thousands of eggs inside his torso. Took him weeks to die. Ugly business. I'm telling you, Dan, the kiosks are not to be trifled with. Not unless you fancy your ribcage being transformed into a monster incubator. I'm pretty sure the word is trifled with, I corrected. And consider me duly warned. I appreciate your wisdom, almighty Croc Dog, but I'm guessing old Fritz wasn't a level 22 with enough magical firepower to level a city block with toxic sludge. Besides, I glanced at the boxy mall kiosk, some 30 feet away, then down at the strange item in my hands. I'm pretty sure this is right where we're supposed to be. The item in question resembled an ugly wooden plaque with a burnished bronze faceplate that had the words Kiosk Franchise Opportunity engraved into the metal. I'd earned it as a reward for taking down Funtime Frank and cleansing the jungle gym jamboree of the 7th floor from a nasty case of blight. I'd seen plenty of artifacts since clipping into the back rooms, but I'd never seen one quite like this. I focused on the placard and a semi-transparent, mustard yellow text box appeared in the air for what felt like the 100th time. The pop-up resembled one of those 8-bit Nintendo game notifications from the late 80s. Kiosk Franchise Opportunity. Fabled artifact. Type, one-time use. So, you're tired of the whole valiant hero gig and want a little slice of that tasty capitalist pie, huh? Can't say I blame you. Work smarter, not harder, am I right? And if the 21st century has taught us anything, it's that the real money is in franchising and brand licensing deals. That in real estate. This kiosk franchise opportunity is arguably the best and worst parts of both. Nice little plot of land and brand recognition. Just slay the current franchisee of any kiosk connected to the franchisor network, then slap this placard on and boom. You're in business faster than you can say transaction fee. Or, for the truly ambitious, slay the franchisor and claim the entire network. Each kiosk location acts as physical interface terminal for a secure superspace mass storage facility. Which is really just a fancy way of saying it's like a giant progenitor monolith, but for all the shit you want to sell. As the new kiosk franchisee, you'll be able to store any compatible items within and shoppers will be able to purchase or bid on those items directly through the kiosk terminal. Once the deal is done and the price paid, all purchased items will be instantly deposited into the customer's personal subspace storage system. No mess, no fuss, no shipping, handling, or waiting. It's the perfect scheme. There's one tiny little catch, however. All transactions conducted through a franchise kiosk are subject to an 85% franchisor fee. As the corporate office is wont to say, you'll take the crumbs, and you'll like it, bitch. Welcome to the fast-paced, cutthroat world of franchising. I dismissed the prompt with a wave of one hand, then glanced back at the kiosk loaded down with bullshit health and wellness products no one could possibly want or need. Clunky massage guns and sleek smart band fitness trackers. Yoga accessories and essential oil diffusers. Bottles of premium-grade holistic supplements and, yes, skincare creams. Hopefully, none of those creams were sentient. There was no one manning the kiosk, but that didn't mean anything. Just because I couldn't currently see anyone, didn't mean there wasn't anyone there. That was Backrooms Survival 101. Hell, the entirety of the third floor looked completely dead. Not a soul in sight. But that was a lie. A lie that could kill if you weren't careful. All around us were equally empty glass-fronted stores with names like Pandora's Music Box and Neon Nightmares. Sure, some of those places were probably abandoned, while others were miniature, nightmarish fiefdoms, filled with horrors that would be only too happy to gut any delver idiotic enough to trespass onto their territory. I wasn't worried about any of them, though. At this point, most of the monsters here were more afraid of me than I was of them. Now just hear me out, Croc said hopefully. What if instead of purposely provoking the unholy wrath of whatever nightmare lives inside that kiosk, we went back to the store and ate pizza together? You can drink all the beer you want, and I'll eat froyo until I can't feel my legs. Doesn't that sound like it would be way more fun? If this goes well, I promise, you can eat froyo until we run out, or you can track diabetes, but we need to handle this first. I grimaced, lips stretching into a thin line. We've got to do something about the aspirants of the skinless court. Those dickweeds are fucking up everything, but this might be a way to fix things. At least temporarily. The placard in my hands wasn't a chance drop from one of the cash-ape and loot machines or some random item, harvested from the corpse of a dead dweller. I'd been purposely given it as a reward. The researcher wanted me to have it. The researcher wanted me to be here. I could feel it. I wasn't entirely sure why, though I had a working theory. It was just a hunch, but my gut told me the researcher didn't like the flayed monarch any more than I did, and this was his way of offering me a helping hand. Or, at least, his way of pointing me in the right direction without getting too overtly involved. Right now, I was little more than a fly buzzing around the head of a dark and vengeful god, but with a little help and enough time, it was possible I could become strong enough to rival even something as powerful as the flayed monarch. The researcher knew it and was looking out for me. In small ways, at least. But the monarch knew it too, which is exactly why he was dispatching his bootlickers to try to cut me down before I could become a legitimate threat. I was a pawn in a cosmic game of chess, and one side was trying to promote me while the other was doing their damnedest to remove me from the board entirely. So far, the monarch's thugs hadn't been able to breach my shop directly, so instead they'd been targeting my customers and attempting to blockade my doors. Playing medieval siege to my shop. Unfortunately, the tactic was working. Fewer and fewer customers were getting through the blockades, and moving the doorway anchors was a deadly risk since it meant actively confronting the aspirants. But maybe the strange wooden placard could change that. If I could set up an independent discount Dan pop-up shop, which would serve as an extension to the storefront, maybe I could break the court's stranglehold. True, one dinky little kiosk probably wouldn't be enough to shift the tides of war, but it was a place to start, and one line in the description stood out like a road flare: for the truly ambitious, slay the franchisor and claim the entire network. I wasn't entirely sure who or what the franchisor was, but that one little line was a tantalizing promise. One too good to ignore. We've put this off long enough, I said, tucking the wooden placard back into my storage space. Let's just roll up our sleeves and get her done. Can't we at least wait for Jacob or Temperance? Croc pleaded. Both delvers had left a week ago, bound for Howler's Hold, the safe harbor of the 7th floor. I was hoping to strike up a business partnership with their leader, Wraith, but I'd made a lot of enemies since waking up in the lobby with a hangover to end all hangovers. Although both Jacob and Temp vouched for the Howlers, I wasn't going to take any unnecessary chances where other delvers were concerned. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But was it actually paranoia if someone really was out to get me? Or was it just being smart? Either way, better to let them come to me instead. That's what my friends were doing, paving the way for our trade alliance. At least, I hoped that's what they were doing. Relax, Croc. I patted the dog on its blue nose. Everything's gonna be alright. This is the 3rd floor, not the 30th. Doesn't matter what we're dealing with, there's no way that whatever's in there is tougher than Funtime Frank or half of the other things we murdered on the 7th floor. Remember Harold the Terror Clown, or the Sisters of Silent Shadows? Trust me, we got this. And in the very unlikely event that things go tits up, we can always jump ship. I jerked a thumb over one shoulder, toward the glass door with a rectangular plastic plate tacked onto the front that read, Discount Dan's Backroom Bargains. Once upon a time that door had connected to a boutique video store called the VHS Vault, but thanks to a little interdimensional spatial magic, it now led to my own personal retail empire. Besides, we don't need him, I added. We already have reinforcements. I brought my hands together in a thunderclap and activated one of my newest relics, Unhinged Taxidermist. With it, I could summon taxidermid horrors, obedient monstrosities cobbled together from the leftover remains of slain enemies then mashed together with bits of metal and machinery. Mana poured from my core as two inky black rifts in space opened, one to my left, another to my right. A single nightmarish abomination shambled out from each portal, flanking me like a pair of Frankenstein bodyguards. The first resembled a sickly humanoid, cat-like creature with electric blue fur, crisscrossed with toxic green stripes and mangled seams that held her tattered hide together. This thing was all that remained of Cynthia Lynx, the former guitar player for the Jungle Gym Jamboree. Her instrument was missing, and I'd replaced one arm with a coppery limb, taken from Vex Vixen. Her other hand was also gone, chopped off by Temperance, and I'd grafted on a magically powered artifact chainsaw in its place. The second minion had the body of a huge animatronic black bear, red muscle and gleaming chrome peeking out from beneath badly butchered fur. Sitting on top of the bear's stocky body was the head of Drumbo Chumbo, the pachyderm percussionist. He had a riot shield strapped to one arm and carried an enormous sledgehammer, designed for punching through masonry, in his free hand. A weapon like that was built to be used with two hands, but Drumbo easily wielded it like a baseball bat. Both creatures were horrifying beyond words and made my skin crawl. Turned out, being a pseudo-necromancer was way less cool in real life than it was in books or video games. There were so many moral conundrums to tackle, to say nothing of the eye-watering stench that lingered around the abominations like a cloud. A small part of me hated that this was what I'd become, but they say beggars can't be choosers, and I sure as shit couldn't afford the luxury of being choosy. Not with so many threats arrayed against me. Fact was, both horrors were level 12, half of what they'd been in life, and could likely kill anything on this floor without batting an eye. That was too good to pass up, even if it was both morally and physically repugnant. Oh fiddlesticks, the dog finally muttered while side-eyeing my taxidermid horrors. We can attack the kiosk. I still want to go on record and say that I've got a bad feeling about this, but I trust your judgment, Dan. If you think this is the right move, then I'm behind you 100%. This is the right decision, I silently repeated over and over again, trying to convince myself more than anyone else. Finally, I nodded to the dog, then drew my Von Ripclaw hammer from the tool belt slung low around my hips. With a thought and a whisper of mana, my demolition screwdriver rose into the air, held aloft by an invisible tether of telekinetic force. A twisted version of that same power connected me to my horrors. The summoned monsters had rudimentary intelligence and could act of their own volition to a limited degree, but neither had any sort of personality. Not like Baby Hands or Princess Penny Puff, the two cannon fodder golems who helped run the shop. No, these things were shuffling, automatons of meat and machine connected to my mind. They were undead weapons, guided by my raw will. Without needing to speak, I directed them forward and they obeyed instantly. I padded toward the kiosk with horrors accompanying me on either side, while Croc brought up the rear. My spelunker's sixth sense warned me about potential traps, dangers, and pitfalls, and the kiosk burned in my vision with a halo of red light. A blazing road flare that screamed "Do not fuck with me" at the top of its lungs. I was absolutely gonna fuck with it. As my high school career counselor could confirm, making good life choices was never my strong suit. I stopped just short of the kiosk, took one more deep breath to calm my nerves, then reached out one hand and plucked a slim massage wand from one of the shelves. The wand was obviously meant to double as a personal vibrator, but it was also a surprisingly decent artifact. It had one open effect slot and a primary ability called Good Vibrations, which could be used once a day to massage away up to 25 points physical damage. I absently placed it into subspace storage while I waited for something bad to happen. For a long moment nothing did. I shot a questioning look at Croc, who was already backing up a few paces. "Something's coming, Dan," the dog said. "Trust me, I can feel it." As if on cue, the ground began to shake and rumble, and the wooden storage doors encircling the base of the kiosk chattered like teeth. It felt like a small earthquake, or the floor shifts that occasionally happened. There was a deep groan and an odd scraping noise that reminded me of a churning cement mixer. Then the kiosk lurched straight up into the air amidst a whirlwind of dust and flying debris. I danced back a handful of paces as a pair of enormous, multi-segmented legs emerged from a cavernous sinkhole in the linoleum-covered floor. The color drained from my face. Those alien limbs looked like spider legs, each as thick as my thigh and covered in spiky protrusions. They weren't black, though, but rather a deep purple at the tips, which gradually faded to a vibrant orange. It almost would have been pretty if it wasn't so terrifying. "What the hell is that?" I yelled at Croc to be heard over the clatter. "I thought you said there were sales sirens inside these things." I waved toward the kiosk, which was now suspended a good 20 feet above the ground. "You never said anything about sales spiders." More insectoid legs emerged from the dust cloud. "It's the backrooms, Dan. The only ironclad rule is that everything, everywhere, all the time is both lying to you and trying to murder you. Also, I hate to be that dog, but I told you we shouldn't mess with these things." "Not to be truffled with," I said. "Had a bad feeling in my tummy," I said. But does anyone listen to Croc? No. And now you're going to die, and it'll take me months to get over it. As the swirling dust plume began to settle and disperse, we got our first good look at the monstrosity. Not a spider at all. Nope. It was a giant fucking hermit crab. It was also wearing the kiosk on its back like a shell. The creature turned, hateful black eyes locking on us as its scythe-like mandibles opened and closed like a pair of giant scissors. Well shit. Giant, kiosk-wearing hermit crab had definitely not been on my bingo card. A tag flashed above its head, followed in short order by a racial description, courtesy of the Researcher's Codex. Dweller 0.33280, Kiki the Kiosk Crab. Level 28. Behold Kiki the Kiosk Crab, the current franchisee of this particular kiosk location, not to be confused with its hatchmate Kelsey the Kiosk Crab, who is a racist piece of shit. These things are the reason why the other dwellers stay out of the main corridors. Its massive claws can crush concrete, and its beady eyes are always on the lookout for its next victim, which, if you're reading this, is probably you. Although this pile of meat and chitin is as brainless as the kiosk it inhabits, it is fiercely territorial and an apex predator of the third floor. But don't worry, it probably won't eat you. Not at first, anyway. These things lay like 1,000 eggs, and it turns out those eggs need somewhere warm and wet and gooey to incubate. Fun fact, the living human torso works great, so you have that to look forward to. And stay frosty, because even after the babies hatch, many will stay with mama until they're big enough to branch out and find shells to call their own. Huh. Apparently Croc was right about that whole egg incubator thing. Maybe I owed him an apology. Assuming we survived this battle. Chapter 2. The kiosk crab scuttled toward us with a warbling screech, lashing out with a pair of enormous claws big enough to cut me in two. Cynthia 2.0 single quote S chainsaw hand screamed as she charged with no regard for her own safety. A pincher darted toward her, but she was surprisingly nimble, and ducked the attack, before laying into one of the crab's legs with her blade. Orange sparks flew as chainsaw met chitin. A health bar appeared above the crab's head, but it didn't drop even a fraction of an inch. Drumbo and Croc both circled right, trying to outmaneuver the creature, while I unleashed my screwdriver and activated Pressure Washer all at once. Pressure Washer was my best single-target ranged attack, and I'd finally sacrificed enough relics to push it up to level 5, unlocking the first threshold ability in the process. The mana per second had increased from 5 to 7, but that was offset by the hefty surge in damage output, which jumped from 15 to 27 points of slashing damage on contact, while the additional scalding damage doubled from 5 to 10 points. Hitting the first threshold also unlocked a secondary effect called Dual Nozzle, which let me simultaneously cast 2 streams of water at once, though doing so cut the damage in half for each stream. My beam of pressurized water slashed across one of the crab's flexing claws, but like Cynthia 2.0 single-quote-s chainsaw, the attack failed to even scratch the creature's bulky exoskeleton. That didn't mean the crab was invulnerable, however. The Backrooms was a hard and unforgiving instructor, but it had taught me many lessons since I'd first arrived. One of those hard-won lessons was that everything had a weakness if you survived long enough to find it. The crab's armor was tough, but its deeply recessed eyes looked awfully squishy. The screwdriver shot forward on strands of telekinetic power and slammed directly into one eye with a sickening pop. Blue blood spurted out in a high arc and the creature's health bar dipped for the first time, dropping from 440 down to 390. The creature squealed in rage and pain. Its mandibles opened wide, and a blue fog bank rolled out. For a second, I thought the crab could breathe fire, because that would be just my fucking luck, but it wasn't flame. No. It was a cloud of incense that smelled like lavender. The creature dropped low and spun like a top, the cloud quickly filling the courtyard with its potent aroma. The gas clawed its way into my nose and mouth. In an instant, my lungs were a furnace and my eyes felt like they were being stung by a swarm of fire ants. A muddy yellow notice, embossed with a black exclamation point, strobed in the corner of my vision. You have been afflicted with essential oil cloud lavender barrage and suffer from 50% reduced vision, painful breathing, and sluggish reaction speed for 2 minutes or until cured. Back during my days in the Marine Corps, I'd been volunteered, entirely against my will, obviously, for the non-lethal weapons combat course. It was a grueling month-long slog, designed as a way to legally haze Marines. The course ultimately culminated in what was called the non-lethal weapons gauntlet. First you were tased for unspecified reasons. Then, before fully recovering, you were blasted in the face with bear mace and forced to run an obstacle course, where you had to fight off assailants who all had riot gear and gas masks. It was exactly as bad as it sounds. This was just like that. As terrible as that training had been, however, it helped me now. Despite the pain, I stayed cool and kept a level head. Although I couldn't cure myself, I knew this was just uncomfortable but not life-threatening. It would pass. Squinting against the pain, I forced my way through the haze and lethargy, and recalled my screwdriver with a slight mental tug. It zipped back to me and stopped on a dime, hovering just above my left shoulder once more. The rest of my team was faring much better against the noxious blue fog, which was already starting to dissipate. Neither Cynthia 2.0 or Drumbo Rebooted were technically living creatures, so they didn't have to worry about inconvenient things like breathing or pain, and the toxic cloud seemed to minimally affect Croc. The second the crab finally stopped its mad spin, all three darted in again. This time Cynthia jammed her roaring chainsaw into the crab's leg joints, which were more vulnerable than the armor itself, while Drumbo laid into the monster with his huge sledgehammer. The blunt force trauma seemed far more effective than Cynthia's slashing blades. As for Croc, the rubbery dog was now easily the size of a bear. While the crab had been busy breakdancing across the courtyard, the mimic had taken an escalator to the second level, which overlooked the battlefield below. Bombs away. The dog cried as it vaulted over the railing and cannonballed straight down onto the kiosk hut, which served as the crab's shell. The dog bear tore at the kiosk itself while fleshy blue tentacles slithered out, searching for any weakness in the creature's armored hide. I let loose with another concentrated blast of water, targeting a claw joint, just like Cynthia 2.0. My attack hit true, and this time the beam of water sawed through the limb. One huge claw clattered to the floor and blue blood spurted like a fountain as the crab's total health dropped by another 10%. In retaliation, the crab reared up like a bucking bronco, easily tossing Croc from its back though inadvertently exposing its belly. Jackpot. There didn't seem to be any armor there at all. That had to be its weakness. Before I could exploit the opening, the crab dropped back down and the kiosk storage doors shot open, disgorging a horde of smaller crabs. Though smaller didn't mean small. Dweller 0.335D, juvenile kiosk crab level 5. Thuds and thumps hit the floor as a horde of crabs ranging in size from chickens to Rottweilers filled the courtyard. All were too small for proper kiosks of their own, so instead they sported a wide range of discarded mall items as shells. Some wore pedicure foot baths or metal cookware. Others, plastic trash bins, glass fish tanks, and clay flower pots, likely looted from a garden supply shop. One even protruded from a comically oversized bun. The smaller crabs swarmed Cynthia 2.0 en masse. Cynthia backtracked away from the larger kiosk crab, hacking at the encroaching tidal wave of legs and claws, but for every crab she cut down another took its place. In seconds, they buried her in scuttling limbs and armor-plated bodies, tearing away pieces of meat and machine with ruthless pincers and powerful mandibles. More of the crabs were bum-rushing Croc, though that was the last mistake they would ever make. The mimic was substantially stronger than either of my summon horrors and ripped the crabs apart with pitiful ease. Its formidable bear-like claws shredded exoskeletons while fleshy tentacles pulled the crabs into the cavernous, teeth-studded maw that filled Croc's entire chest cavity. With a thought, I redirected Drumbo booted away from the larger kiosk crab and toward Cynthia 2.0. The horror responded without a moment of hesitation, spinning on one oversized heel, then charging into the writhing mass of crustacean bodies with his sledgehammer swinging for the fences. Now that Croc wasn't riding the kiosk crab like an insane rodeo cowboy hopped up on Red Bull and truck stop caffeine pills, I had a few more options to work with. I thrust my hammer forward as though I were wielding Mjolnir, and not a Vaughn, 19 ounces Ripclaw, and cast my most powerful AoE ability, Stinslayer Maelstrom. The spell conjured a hurricane of industrial-grade bleach, so potent it could strip flesh from bone like a school of hungry piranha. The only drawback was that it didn't discriminate between friend and foe. Anything unlucky enough to get caught in the blast would be picking its skin up off the floor. With Croc and the others away from Mama Crab, I wasn't going to get a better shot. Mana poured out of my core as violent, swirling blue clouds formed overhead. Great beads of sweat rolled down my forehead and slit my chest as my mana pool dropped by 35 points. Fat, sizzling drops of frothy blue rain fell on the gargantuan crab in a torrential downpour. The corrosive super bleach splashed harmlessly against the kiosk itself, but viciously bit into the crab's exoskeleton. The dweller's HP bar continued to drop slowly but steadily as the spell extracted its terrible price. The gargantuan crab let loose an undulating screech that felt like the metaphysical equivalent of nails on a chalkboard and turned its attention fully on me for the first time. The kiosk crab put on an impressive burst of speed and shot forward, her remaining claw rocketing toward me like a piston. Working on pure combat instinct, I activated Neural Slipstream, my newest Fable Great Relic, forged by combining Moving Workway, Mall Ninja's Strike, and Frequency Shift. The last remaining dregs of my mana vanished as cold power surged through me. My limbs went oddly numb as my body turned both translucent and incorporeal, as I transcended the material realm. For 5 seconds, I was a spectral thought, 90% resistant to all forms of damage, capable of phasing through physical objects and terrain hazards, all while moving at 6 times my normal speed. Except, it didn't feel like I was moving fast. Instead, it felt like the world was moving slow. Everything took on an iridescent shimmer and those 5 seconds stretched out like a breath held too long. The world wasn't frozen by any stretch of the imagination, but it was the easiest thing in the world to leap backward, avoiding the incoming claw attack. Although I couldn't technically deal any damage while in spectral thought form, there were still plenty of other things I could do. Notably, any item on my person transformed with me, and they remained completely functional during the phase shift. I pulled a mana restoration elixir, which took the form of a 2-sugary Jolt Cola, and shotgunned that son of a bitch. I'd been chugging beers like this for the better part of 15 years, and it was second nature at this point. Whoever would have thought my borderline alcoholism would prove to be such a tactical combat advantage? Certainly not my battalion CO, that's for sure. I crumpled the empty can and tossed it away as the spell ran its course and the world finally managed to catch back up with me. Gonna have to do better than that, you cantankerous cockwomble. I crowed while lashing out with my screwdriver again. It sailed through the air and smashed into the crab's other eye, popping it like a swollen zit. Just like that, another chunk of HP went right down the drain. The kiosk crab went berserk, huge legs tap dancing across the floor, leaving tiny craters in its wake. The lesser crabs turned as one and rushed toward me, Croc and my minions momentarily forgotten. I was the new #1 target, and the kiosk crab was sending everything it had against me. The Jolt Cola hadn't completely topped off my mana pool, but I still had more than enough juice for a few nasty surprises. I stretched my left hand toward the floor, palm down, fingers splayed outward, and activated another new relic I'd picked up after my battle with Frank and his jungle gym jamboree, Fault Spike. This one, I'd looted off the original Drumbo Chumbo. The same pachyderm percussionist, currently hammering at the kiosk crab with an oversized construct maul. Well, a version of him, anyway. This was my first time actually using the relic in a life-or-death combat scenario. Talk about baptism by fire. The floor trembled and 10 rocky spikes, each as thick as my wrist, erupted upward at various angles, forming a natural half-moon barrier around me. Several spikes ripped through encroaching hermit crabs, killing them on the spot. The rest retreated a few paces, giving me enough room to cut them down with pressure washer. And unlike Kiki the enormous hermit crab, my beam had no problem slicing through their shells. More crabs were scampering at me from all sides, but these things were level 4s and 5s. The power gap between us was a gulf as wide as the Grand Canyon. There were a lot of them, sure, but so long as they didn't bury me, I could kill them all. I slipped back as the smaller crabs crested my spike barrier and rushed toward me, then I darted forward, cackling madly. I pumped mana into my Vaughn and it swelled until it was the size of a medieval warhammer. The weapon sang in my hands as I crushed makeshift shells and snapped overextended limbs. I fired beams of water with my left hand, cutting the crustacean heads down by the boatload. All the while my screwdriver darted back and forth through the air, killing the creatures with quick, precision strikes. Blue blood covered the floor in puddles. It was a massacre. While I handled the many crabs, Croc and my minions resumed their assault on Godzilla Crab. Cynthia 2.0 wasn't looking so hot. The junior crabs had reduced their total health pool to less than 10%, but Croc and Drumbo Rebooted were holding their own. The two worked in tandem, one drawing the kiosk crab's attention while the other smashed or hacked at one armored limb or another. Going that route would take forever, though. We needed to end this before something invariably went wrong, and I had a plan. The internal cooldown for neural slipstream had finally lapsed, so I activated the ability for a second time. Icy power washed through me once more as I temporarily faded from material reality. Instead of retreating like I had before, I bolted forward as the world slowed to a crawl. A giant leg flashed out, but the limp passed through my chest, dealing only a few points of damage, then continued onward, swatting Drumbo across the courtyard like a rag doll. My taxidermid horror cartwheeled through the air and crashed through the large glass window of the Neon Nightmares storefront. The boutique store appeared to be some sort of 80s-themed fashion outlet, filled with brightly colored tops, ridiculous pleather coats and skirts, and far too many feather boas. A trio of mannequins, who'd been motionless in the display window just moments before, lurched to life and threw themselves at the temporarily incapacitated Drumbo. Like the smaller crabs, they were only level 4. Nothing the hulking pachyderm couldn't handle. I repositioned myself until I was directly beneath the giant crustacean. The creature was heavily armored just about everywhere, and even at level 5, my pressure washer skill simply wasn't powerful enough to pierce through the creature's formidable, armored exterior. Its belly was another story entirely. The flimsy particle board of the kiosk was the only thing protecting its undercarriage, and if this thing actually reflected real hermit crab anatomy, then the interior portion of its body would be extremely vulnerable. Although I couldn't personally deal any damage or launch any offensive spells while in thought form, that limitation didn't extend to mental micromanagement, which was technically classified as a utility spell. And because my demolition screwdriver wasn't on my person, but rather floating in the air several feet away, it was still completely solid and 100% locked, cocked, and ready to rock. This was a particularly useful exploit I discovered after a little experimentation. The screwdriver shot upward with the force of a .50 caliber rifle round. It punched through the kiosk flooring just as the effects of neural slipstream ended and I phased back into material reality. Lucky me. A fist-sized hole appeared in the creature's belly and a geyser of fetid blue blood drenched me like a firehouse. I gasped and gagged as some of the goop accidentally went into my mouth. I forced down the desire to vomit up every single thing I'd ever eaten and focused on the job at hand, killing this big ol' sumbitch. I raised one hand and let loose a concentrated beam of water with 90,000 psi of shear force behind it. The crab's natural chitin had deflected pressure washer easily enough, but the thin kiosk flooring offered no such protection. The beam cut through the crab's defenseless stomach, and the monster's health bar flashed and plunged below 10%. More gore rained down, soaking every square inch of my body. Didn't matter. Not now anyway. All that mattered was survival. Was killing this thing. Hammer in hand, I wheeled in a circle and smashed the blunt head into one arachnoid appendage, triggering gavel of get fucked in the process. Normally, the attack burned 20 stamina and dealt damage equal to 20% of the opponent's exist health pool. But, because the enormous murder crab was already below 10% total health, its secondary execute ability, Killing Blow, triggered instead. That also activated the cascading effect Wave of Justice, which applied the gavel's primary damage-dealing effect to all enemy combatants in a 20-foot radius. Most of the smaller crabs caught in range of the blast were dead before they even knew it. Meanwhile, a tsunami of power flowed out of the hammer and the crab's insides just exploded is the only word that really fit. A trickle of gore turned into a flood as its innards dropped onto me. The crab stumbled and swayed, then, with an almost languid motion, it pitched over onto one side. I dove, narrowly clearing the crab's toppling corpse, then rolled back to my feet as a notification pinged in my ear. Research achievement unlocked. Bloodbath. Usually when someone says, "Wow, what a bloodbath," it's a figure of expression. But not you. No, no, no. Clearly, your brain is far too smooth for the nuance of simile or metaphor. You took the assignment literally and just backstroked through a pool of blood and guts. Good job, I guess? I don't know, I have mixed feelings about this. I will say, though, wearing the entrails of your enemies is a great way to dissuade future adversaries. Just ask the flayed monarch. Reward, yeah, no. I really don't want to reinforce this kind of behavior. I've seen where that goes. Title, Bloodbath, increase in your health regeneration by 5% for 8 hours after bathing in the blood of your enemies. I dismissed the achievement, then surveyed the courtyard. It was a scene of pure carnage. There was blood and body parts everywhere. Crab legs and bits of plastic mannequin strewn about haphazardly. Croc was hurriedly stuffing the last crab into its cavernous belly maw while Drumbo rebooted was swaying drunkenly in place. Cynthia was face down on the floor, her limbs twisted in unnatural ways, her health bar at 0. She glimmered then vanished in a flash of light, returned to the extra-dimensional subspace container where she resided when not in use. I would need to repair her before I could summon her again, but she had served admirably. What a fucking mess, I grumbled, plucking at my gore trench outfit. Bloodbath was right. I'd never be able to get the smell or stains out of my clothes. Not if I scrubbed at 'em for a year. Hate to say it, Dan, Croc offered, lumbering toward me, but I did tell you so. The mimic shook its head before shrinking down into the unassuming guise of a rubbery blue dog with goggly eyes. Shouldn't have messed around with the kiosk. Duly noted, I replied, letting the edge of my grimy bathrobe fall in disgust. Now help me loot these corpses and clean this mess up. And remember to keep any bodies you can, I added, scanning the sea of pinchers and segmented legs. I have a feeling these things could come in handy down the road. Chapter 3. It took me and Croc most of an hour to loot the corpses, sort through the various shards and relics, and harvest the salvageable body parts. That last bit was the worst by far and made me feel like a ghoul. Still, as incredibly distasteful as my new ability was, it was too powerful to ignore. I could summon 2 taxidermid horrors for every relic level, and even at level 1 it was already paying massive dividends. So, even though it made me sick to my stomach, I wrapped a piece of cloth across my nose and mouth to help with the stink and did what needed doing. Just imagine what kind of monstrosities I could build with all these crab pieces. I even had a few ideas rattling around in my head that had nothing at all to do with combat. The loot was also great. All of the younger crabs had at least 1 or 2 shards, some of the chunkier ones even carried uncommon shards, and most also carried a common great relic. They were basic bitch tier stuff. Quick Stitch Kit looked like a gas station first aid kit and offered a very slight bump to overall health Reagan, while Survival Can Opener was a stamina-based relic that minutely boosted physical attacks while using a bladed weapon. Nothing I could personally use, but better than most of the shitty relics on the 3rd floor. I'd be able to sell or trade them for a pretty profit, especially if I could get a trade alliance with Howler's Hold nailed down. Kiki the kiosk crab had 2 uncommon relics stashed away in its core. The first, Chitin Armor, was a physical relic that significantly boosted toughness. Unfortunately, equipping it also caused the user to grow an exoskeleton that drastically slowed movement speed and would become permanent over time. That was a hard pass for me. I for one preferred skin over hardened plate armor, even if skin was less combat effective. The second, Prismatic Essential Oil Diffuser, looked exactly like its namesake and was the source of the strange breath weapon the crab had used during the battle. It dealt decent damage but was also wildly unpredictable, just like every boss babe who swore by the power of essential oils. Prismatic Essential Oil Diffuser. Uncommon Relic, Level 1. Range, Line of Sight. Cost, 10 mana. Duration, Lingering effects up to 2 minutes. Cooldown, 2 minutes. Ever walk past the mall kiosk and get a whiff of essential oils so intense it feels like your nose is being physically assaulted? Yeah, this is the weaponized version of that. But watch out, because this chaotic cloud of fragrant bullshit is a double-edged sword that can cut both ways, and you'll never be sure what you'll end up with. Randomly unleash one of the following effects upon casting: Lavender Barrage. All enemies in the area of effect are partially blinded and afflicted with painful respiratory discomfort for 2 minutes. Peppermint Palsy. All enemies in the area of effect receive 15 points of cold damage and are slowed by 20% for 1 minute. Eucalyptus Bliss. All allies in the area of effect are engulfed in a swirling cloud of eucalyptus vapor, causing extreme lethargy while simultaneously restoring 25 points of health and mana for 39 seconds. Chamomile Bedlam. All allies in the area of effect become disoriented and randomly switch allegiances for 10 seconds, attacking friend and foe alike. Tea Tree Burn. All creatures in the area of effect receive 20 points of fire damage and are afflicted with an additional point of burn damage per 5 seconds for 55 seconds. Bergamot Frenzy. All creatures in the area of effect are enveloped in a noxious hallucinogenic mist that causes terrifying illusions for 2 minutes. This relic enables mana usage. Using the relic was insane since it was just as likely to hurt as to help, but there was no denying it was powerful. Maybe I could forge it with something else to make it a little less unpredictable and liable to blow up in my face. The last relic was a rare, which appeared to be an upgraded version of the quick-stitch kit the other crabs had. It was called Molten Mend, which, much to my horror, allowed the user to mold injured body parts and regrow new, healthy appendages over the course of several weeks. I was definitely going to hang on to that one just because it was one of those things I'd rather have and not need, than need and not have. Still, it was extremely disturbing. The real prize, however, wasn't the shards, relics, or even the experience. It was the kiosk itself. The hut was in bad shape from the battle, but I knew it would self-repair over time, and the cosmetic damage didn't seem to affect its functionality in any way. When I tacked the ugly franchise opportunity placard onto the kiosk, there was a flash of cerulean light followed by a prompt. Congratulations, you've just filed an application claim for an eligible kiosk terminal currently connected to the franchisor network. If your application is approved, you will be able to freely use the kiosk interface terminal to buy, sell, and store compatible items, including but not limited to artifacts, relics, and other qualifying pro-generated material. Note, all transactions conducted through a franchise kiosk are subject to an 85% franchisor fee to be paid in full at the time of transaction to the Steamboat Studios corporate office on the 99th floor. Proceed? Yes/no. The deal was terrible, but I accepted out of sheer curiosity more than anything else. That and my gut intuition, which was still telling me that the researcher was actively trying to help me in some way. He'd awarded me the franchise opportunity placard for a reason. I was sure of it. I was also curious to learn more about the franchisor, and whatever the hell Steamboat Studios was. Croc had mentioned the franchisor ages ago, but I hadn't paid much mind at the time. There were so many strange and fascinating things inhabiting the backrooms that if something wasn't actively trying to murder me, it just ended up as a footnote inside my brain, filed away for later. But the franchisor was no longer some nebulous being. Some myth or legend like so many of the other entities I'd heard whispered about like ghosts around a campfire. It was real. And it lived down on the 99th floor. Information was power inside the backrooms, and that little tidbit felt significant even if there wasn't anything I could do with it right now. After a few minutes, another prompt came through, notifying me that my franchisee application claim had been approved by Steamboat Studios. Why was I not surprised? I immediately accessed the kiosk terminal and started poking around at the various options. After only a few minutes, I realized that it was even better than I could have hoped for. Other than that whole 85% transaction fee for using the damned thing, of course. In many ways, the kiosk terminal was remarkably similar to the progenitor monoliths that dotted each floor. Welcome to the Variant Kiosk Network, owned and operated by the Steamboat Studios Corporation of the 99th floor. As the current kiosk franchisee, you have several options not visible to kiosk customers. To explore those features, please select from one of the available options below. Secure Superspace Mass Storage Facility Deposit Remove Franchise Inventory Set Inventory Pricing Manage Kiosk Affiliates Auction House System Administration. Basically, the thing was a giant interdimensional storage vault, and unlike my personal subspace storage system, there didn't seem to be any weight restrictions, though there were a few prohibited items. Namely, living creatures. The biggest catch was that I couldn't access the kiosk storage system from anywhere at any time like I could with my personal subspace storage system. Instead, I needed to use the physical terminal to deposit or remove items. Interestingly, other delvers could use the terminal to view any items I had listed and make purchases. On top of the flat buy it now feature, I could also implement a bidding system, which would allow delvers to bid against each other, potentially driving up the price of certain coveted relics or artifacts. Then, after concluding the transaction, the item in question would be instantly whisked away from the kiosk superspace storage and deposited into the buyer's personal subspace storage system. It really was like magic. The best feature, by far, was the one tacked on at the very bottom, almost as though it were an afterthought. Auction House System Administration. That was the real game changer. It allowed delvers other than me to list items through the kiosk, like some sort of giant interdimensional eBay, which could then be bid on by other kiosk users through the interface terminal. And, just like eBay, I got a percentage cut on every transaction. I could even directly adjust the percentage amount through the Affiliates tab, though I had no intention of gouging sellers with a ridiculously high transaction fee, the way the franchisor was gouging me. That 85% cut made the kiosk almost worthless, since I was doing all of the work, taking all of the risk, and reaping so little reward. But so far as I was concerned, that was just another little speed bump to navigate. It might take me a while, but I'd figure out the solution eventually. In the meantime, I wanted to see how the system worked, so I went ahead and deposited some run-of-the-mill survival gear, a few extra common-grade artifacts I had tucked away in storage, and a handful of the quick-stitch kit and survival can opener relics I'd looted off the junior hermit crabs. I had to triple the price of what I would have normally sold the items for inside my shop, and I was still barely turning a profit. That was just the price of convenience, I guess. Though if I could find a way to reduce the franchisor's exorbitant fee, the kiosk had the potential to be a gold mine. I took a few extra minutes to spray paint the kiosk stall, discount Dan's pop-up shop, and leave a few of the twinning rings behind. Then Croc and I left the stall where it was and headed home. I was tired, sore, and surprisingly hungry, despite the fact that I was still covered in blue crab blood and smelled like rotten sea scallops. Asterisk. The store buzzed with activity. Delvers shopping, others eating enchanted pizza or hot dogs, one even making an extremely bold choice to haggle with one of my cannon fodder golems, Princess Penny Puff, devourer of worlds, and self-proclaimed servant of Vorgel, the devouring maw who dwells beneath. I still wasn't entirely certain who or what that was. Hell, I wasn't even certain Vorgel was a real entity at all. The negotiations were not going great. Pony Puff was currently screeching like a wounded goat while the customer flinched and folded in on themselves like a dying star. That's how pretty much every negotiation with Princess Pony Puff went. Now there was someone not to be trifled with. "Hey, good, you're back," Taylor said, hustling over from the concession stand I'd acquired from the Jungle Gym Jamboree. She was one of my two new human employees, a 20-something-year-old college student from Oklahoma State University who'd Clifton after a drunken sorority rager. Against all odds, she and her friend, Stephanie, had survived long enough to stumble into the shop, and now the pair worked split shifts at the concession stand in exchange for room and board, along with all the food they could eat and a small in-store spending stipend. She slowed as she got closer, covering her mouth and nose with one hand as she eyeballed my outfit with open disgust. I could feel judgment radiating off her in waves. "Oh my God, what happened to you?" she asked, voice muffled by her palm. "Ah, she cares about you, Dan," Croc said, tail happily waggling from side to side. "Only because I'm pretty sure this," she gestured at my whole person, "is how you end up with airborne super dysentery, and I for one have no desire to die while on the Oregon Trail. Now can you please tell me why you smell like that?" "Like what?" I asked, playing dumb. "Like the inside of a sushi dumpster." She squinted, studying me closer. "It looks like a giant squid exploded all over you." "Giant hermit crab, actually," I replied, "but good guess. Now what do you need?" I could really use some alone time with a bathtub full of hand sanitizer and enough bleach to drown a moose. "Best you're going to get is baby wipes and Febreze," she replied, taking a few steps back from me, "and I doubt that'll do the trick. But maybe try to do something to freshen up because we've got a visitor. Temperance and Jacob are here with some guy from Howler's Hold. His name is Wraith. Or Wrath, maybe. I can't remember, but it's something super edgelord like that. That got my attention." "How long have they been waiting?" I asked. "Hour or so," she replied, shrugging one shoulder. "Not too long. The three of them are in the break room." "Perfect," I said, rubbing my palms together. This was great news. I'd been genuinely starting to worry that something bad had happened to my friends. Maybe the aspirants had gotten to them. Or maybe the hold wasn't as friendly a place as they'd remembered. I'd even entertained the possibility that the two of them had simply abandoned me to my fate, like rats bailing off a sinking ship. I still wasn't entirely sure what Jacob's motives were for helping me, but I didn't think he would up and leave like that. Temperance was another matter. I considered her a friend of sorts, but she was also crazy, wild, and unpredictable. Now that I'd helped her get back in the good graces of the Howlers, there was every chance she would leave me twiddling my thumbs like a jackass. I'd also been worried that the Howlers wouldn't meet me on my own turf. It was a huge risk and one I hadn't been willing to take. At the moment, I was actively being hunted by some of the most powerful beings in the backrooms, so just strolling willy-nilly into a settlement filled with potentially hostile delvers was one step short of suicidal. Coming here was equally dangerous for them, though. It was a bold move and showed that the Howlers were both open to a partnership, and that they were dealing in good faith. Send back a couple of pizzas in case of beer. Good whiskey, too. And some of those cigars Princess Ponypuff likes to smoke. Anything else? Taylor asked, arching an eyebrow. Maybe I could raid the Blighted Carpet Emporium over in Quadrant 13 and find some red carpet we could roll out for this guy. Har, I shot back. Joke all you want, but this is a big deal. If we could lock down an alliance with the Howlers, it could change everything. More customers. More loot. I cracked a lopsided grin. I might even be able to give you a raise. Gee, I don't know how you could possibly top a camp cot I have to share with another person and all the pizza I could eat. I snorted. Say what you will, but Taylor had spunk. I like that. Just do it, okay? Beer, pizza, whiskey, cigars. Fine, she grumbled, but only if you promise to do something about the smell. It's seriously gross. Aye, Captain. I offered her a small salute, then marched into the personal hygiene aisle. I grabbed a packet of baby wipes, every Marine's best friend while out in the field, a can of Old Spice body spray, a stick of deodorant, a bottle of hand sanitizer, and a jug of mouthwash. Supplies in hand, I beelined for the employees-only private bathroom. I spent 15 minutes fruitlessly trying to clean myself up. That blue blood stained worse than ink, and even scrubbing at my hands with dish soap and hand sanitizer didn't get it entirely off my skin. I picked off all the visible chunks, baby wiped the rest of my body, and splashed a liberal amount of water over my face and hair. It was a losing battle. I needed to acquire a shower, damn it. That and a decent washer and dryer. My clothes were beyond salvageable. I regarded myself in the bathroom mirror and grimaced at what was staring back at me. My brown hair had grown shaggy. Not long, but not the usual mid-fade that would have passed Marine Corps muster. Instead of stubble, I had a short beard, peppered in a few spots with gray hair. My face looked much leaner, almost gaunt. Between my heightened athleticism score and walking for 10 or more hours a day, I'd lost almost 30 pounds all while packing on lean muscle. I felt better than I had in years, but I looked like a bag of dried dog shit. Especially in my red and gold bathrobe, Daisy Duke jorts, and stained wife-beater undershirt, which was tastefully accented by my tool belt. Anyone meeting me for the first time would assume I was an insane murder hobo, but there wasn't anything I could do about that. I finished cleaning up the best I could, slapped on a new layer of deodorant, then chugged some mouthwash in a desperate bid to get the taste of rotten fish off my tongue. Like my clothes, it was a losing battle. As ready as I was ever gonna be, I left the bathroom behind and headed for the employees' lounge, ready to cut a deal with the leader of Howler's Hold. Chapter 4. Even though I'd mentally prepared myself for just about anything this place could throw at me, Wraith still caught me off guard. Quite impressive, considering I'd literally just murdered a giant hermit crab using a mall kiosk as a shell. At this point, I was convinced nothing could surprise me anymore, yet somehow the backrooms still had a way of proving me wrong. Turned out, Wraith was a furry. Just like Temperance. In hindsight, I probably should have seen that coming. Especially since God seemed to hate me. Unlike Temperance, who was mostly normal-looking with a few oddities, skin-tight bunny suit, fluffy white boots and gloves, and a pair of floppy ears, Wraith was the real deal. A furry's fury, if you will. He wore a deep blue fursuit with a patch of silver covering his chest and stomach, and a huge bull head with a pair of curving horns and oversized anime eyes. He also had tactical police riot gear strapped on over the outfit. Shoulder pads, chest plate, shin and forearm guards. The whole 9 yards. Wraith being a furry wasn't even the weirdest part, though. The real kick in the teeth came when the leader of the hold pulled off his mask and set it on the table. He wasn't a human and, just like his fursona, the dude had the head of an honest-to-God bull. His fur was so black it looked like he'd been dipped headfirst into an inkwell, and he had a set of wicked horns that jutted up from above a pair of floppy black ears. A tag popped up, along with a brief racial description, courtesy of my researcher's codex ability. Delver number 07T-01, B07DXD332M, Eclipiotor. Transmog level 29. Imagine a high school football star who hit a goth phase during their junior year and decided to get really into Wicca as a giant fuck you to their overbearing WASP parents. That's your basic Eclipiotor in a nutshell. Born on a world that exists in the constant veil of a never-ending cosmic eclipse, these guys are as good with a mana as they are with a battle axe. Although Eclipiotors are both powerful warriors and adept spellslingers, they tend to have all the dexterity and hand-eye coordination of a hungry toddler. They are also the most likely to get drunk at a wedding party and hit on the bride-to-be, just for your information. Also, maybe don't mention their height. Being on the shorter side, Eclipiotors tend to get a little touchy and will often launch into this whole spiel about the 666 rule, and how it's a bunch of fucking bullshit. Still, in battle, these are the guys you want on your front line and in your back pocket. Just don't ask them to grab the dinner plates off the top shelf. The bullman sat across from me in his plastic folding chair with an easy confidence, almost as though it were a throne, and this was his kingdom instead of mine. This was a guy who was used to being in charge. Used to being obeyed. His dark, inhuman eyes catalogued every inch of me, from the scraggly beard to the stained bathrobe, filing away the details. I got the sense that he was weighing me. Judging me. Deciding whether I was worth his time and energy. Whether I was worth his trust. "I can see you have questions," Wraith said without preamble. "Let me save you the trouble and just answer the first one that you're definitely thinking, but are probably too afraid to ask because you think you're gonna offend me. Why are you wearing a bull fursuit if you're an actual bull person?" I offered. "Why am I wearing a bull fursuit if I'm an actual bull person?" He agreed with a nod. "How do you know that was going to be my first question?" "Because it's everyone's first question," Wraith replied with a thin smile. Not all that surprising, either, since this all seems a bit redundant. He gestured at the bull mask on the table, then to his own bovine face. "The answer isn't complicated, though. And I suspect that I'm stuck wearing this fursuit for the very same reason you're stuck wearing that ugly bathrobe and those delightfully charming jean shorts." I snorted. At least he had a sense of humor. "The suit's an artifact," I said, more statement than question. "A powerful one," he replied, and loaded to the tits with sigils that I can't reclaim. "I've also had the suit a lot longer than I've been a transmog. Keep that in mind before you decide to jump with both feet into one of those variant helix splicers." He paused and leaned forward as though confiding a great secret. "If you think you look dumb now, just imagine how dumb you'll look as a giant toucan in a goddamn bathrobe and jorts." That coaxed a genuine laugh out of me. Wraith leaned back and grabbed a clear plastic cup from the table, half full with bourbon. The pizza was sitting between us on the table, completely untouched, but the alcohol was seeing some use. Jacob was leaning against the counter, sipping on an amber ale, while Temperance was drinking straight from a plastic jug of vodka. She had a cigar in her other hand and was taking languid puffs between drinks. My stomach let out an audible gurgle, so I grabbed a slice. It was probably bad manners to hold diplomatic negotiations while stuffing your face with pizza, but I didn't give a shit. I was hungry and this was my home. Bathrobe aside, Wraith continued after a beat, "I gotta admit, this is a damned impressive place you have here. It's small, still. Smaller than the hold by a fair margin, but the potential. He rubbed thoughtfully at his square, bovine jaw. It was an oddly human gesture. Well, the potential is undeniable. Even if the only thing you offered was a way to easily move between floors, this place would be worth its weight in gold. It's not hard to see why so many people want you dead. Not sure if that's a compliment or not, I replied. Oh, it definitely is, Wraith said. I'll tell you plainly, the Howlers are no fan of the Skinless Court or the Black Harbor. And at the moment, discount Dan, you're the most wanted man in the backrooms. That's no mean feat. Color me impressed. Wraith reached into his suit and pulled free a caricature sketch of me and slapped it down on the table. Reward minus 20x gold loot tokens, 1x diamond loot token, 1x ruby loot token, 1x jade loot token, 1x mythic grade relic. I whistled. Holy shit. That was a veritable fortune. I was half tempted to turn myself in for that price. Not even the Boundless Wanderer has such a high price tag on his head, Wraith said, sounding genuinely amazed. He tapped the edge of the poster with one finger. Word on the street is that the Skinless Court is actually offering 3 times that amount if someone can bring you in alive. The fact that you've managed to piss both groups off to such a spectacular degree is inspiring as hell. Between you and me, most of the other Howlers are in awe. You've also generated a substantial amount of goodwill by helping cleanse the jungle gym jamboree, Wraith continued. That and saving Temperance. His gaze drifted toward the murder bunny leaning against the counter. She told everyone who would listen about what you did for her. Putting your life on the line to save someone you didn't even know, and a furry no less. That means something to us. Even though Temperance is a murderous psycho with both trust and anger issues, she's also one of us. He canted his head to one side. We owe you one. Temperance glowered at Wraith, puffing furiously on her cigar, as she absently caressed the meat cleaver strapped to her hip. With all that said, he faltered, took a long sip of his bourbon, and swallowed with a gulp. I've gotta be honest with you, there is a small but very vocal minority that wants nothing to do with you or this war of yours. They think it'll bring ruin down on all of us. Jacob openly scoffed. That is underselling it, a bit, I think. He sounded rather heated, and small curls of smoke drifted from his nostrils. A sign of his racial lineage. Like Wraith, Jacob wasn't a human. Humanoid, sure, but not human. He had pale white serpent scales, shimmering violet hair, and upward curling horns that made him look like a demon, plucked straight from the pages of the Old Testament. He wasn't a devil, though. Like Wraith, he was a transmog. A genetic half-breed. He'd been human once upon a time, but he'd opted to voluntarily run his body through the DNA equivalent of an industrial wood chipper. Now he was a Sendril, the distant offspring of the long-dead dragon lords of Vitharia. Admittedly, that sounded super badass, but I wasn't quite ready to trade in my humanity for some neat horns and some extra fire resistance. I'd already given up damn near everything else, friends, family, job, home, and my humanity was the one thing I had left. That in my name. Unless I am badly misremembering, Jacob added, and I could feel the anger in his words. That small but very vocal minority was openly advocating that the Howlers storm the shop, capture Dan, and turn him over to the highest bidder. They also detained Temperance and I against our will until the tribunal acquitted us of wrongdoing. I grunted. That certainly explained what had taken so long. It also made me angry. What right did these people have to treat my friends like that? Wraith wilted under the weight of the accusation but didn't bother denying it. I've already apologized, he said tersely, and I'll remind you that I'm the one who got you out. You act as though we should thank you, Jacob shot back, which struck me as strange. Jacob was rarely angry. Hell, the guy was a pacifist in a world actively trying to murder him at every turn. He'd always vouched for the Howlers, said they were the good guys, the rebel alliance fighting against the Empire, and yet he'd never counted himself among their number. I had to wonder why. Just what was Jacob's connection to the Howlers? He's right, Temperance barked. It never should have come to that. Yeah, none of this is giving me the warm and fuzzies, I said. Don't get me wrong, I am interested in striking a trade alliance, and you seem like a good enough guy, but I'm also not looking to take stupid risks. I've already got enough enemies lining up to kill me. I don't need to invite a bunch of people into my home who are gonna try and chive me the second I let my guard down. I understand your hesitation, Wraith replied earnestly, and if you decide to keep your distance and stay away from the hold, I'd understand that too. But from one rebel leader to another, I'm telling you, if you don't take a few risks, there's a good chance you're gonna end up dead. And, for the record, that's not a threat. It's just reality. The flayed monarch is more powerful than you can possibly imagine, and even though he rarely ventures above the 900th floor, he's got an awfully long reach. The aspirants are already out in force, and believe me, with the bounty on your head, more will come. A lot more. And they won't be low-level shitheads like Hudson and his red hands. I promise you, the things that crawl up from the deep downs will give you nightmares every time you close your eyes. You want to survive, you're gonna need friends. Or, at the very least, allies. And the Howlers could end up being both, given time. Save for those who seek to murder us, Temperance cut in. Like your brother, Jackson. Wraith sighed. Yes, like my brother. He faced Temp. Though, the fact that you're supporting Dan isn't helping things any. Jackson always was a petty little shit, even as a kid. I'd bet money that he's doing all of this just as a way of getting back at you for rejecting him. As Wraith spoke, a few things started to click into place. Temperance had been summarily excommunicated and cast out from the hold for disarming someone, quite literally, who'd gotten a little too handsy with her. At least that's the way she told the story. The lady had quite the temper and knew her way around the meat cleaver, so it wasn't hard to believe. She'd also been given a way to redeem herself, kill Funtime Frank and cleanse the jungle gym jamboree of blight. Wait a minute, I said, holding up one hand, so you're saying the guy who's stirring up all this shit is the same guy who has a grudge against Temperance for chopping off his hands? More or less, Wraith replied. Well, that changes things, I said. I'm not worried about one jackass with an axe to grind, who managed to recruit some of his buddies to help cause trouble. If only it were that simple, Jacob said, swirling his beer. What do you mean? I asked. Jackson isn't just some inane, pompous fool, Temperance said with a scowl. He's one of the 3 tribunes who govern the hold. Wait a minute, I thought this guy ran the hold? I shot back, hooking a thumb toward Wraith. Yes and no, Wraith said, seesawing his head from side to side. It's complicated. Strictly speaking, the hold isn't governed by any one person, it's governed by a tribunal comprised of 3 judges, or tribunes. Me, Jackson, and a guy named Ajax. We each have different responsibilities and fulfill different roles, but we come together to vote on major issues that affect the entire hold. I'm the chief security officer. I run security for the settlement and handle any mission that takes place outside the wire, including all the resupply runs and dealing with outside factions. Like yours, for example, or the various Delver gangs who love to come out of the woodwork to harass us. Ajax, the second tribunal, is our quartermaster. He keeps track of supplies. Makes sure everyone has what they need. Deal with maintenance issues inside the hold. That kind of thing. And Jackson? I asked. Wraith was silent for a second. His role is a bit more nebulous, he finally finished. He's our chief spiritual advisor. I squinted, unable to believe what I was hearing. I'm sorry, he's your chief spiritual advisor? What the fuck is that? Sounds like a fake title you give to someone who doesn't actually do anything. It wasn't Wraith who answered this time, but Jacob. Do you recall me mentioning a group of delvers who believe that the backrooms are a divine test? A proving ground, designed to separate the wheat from the chaff. He quickly shot a glance at Temperance. Yeah, that rings a few bells, I replied. The room callers. Or room cleaners. No, that's not it. It was definitely the room something or others. The room keepers, Temperance corrected sharply. And we do not see it as merely a test. Rather, we believe the backrooms serve as a purifying crucible for the mind, body, and soul. It is our steadfast belief that the chosen few who reach the 1000th floor will be rewarded by the researcher, granted passage to a realm of unending feast, carnality, and bloodshed. Sounds like a blast, I said, not wanting to offend her. What it really sounded like was a heap of bullshit, whipped up by a bunch of desperate people looking for an explanation and a little solace, though I would never say that to Temperance. I was finally starting to get a better picture of what had really happened. Temperance was an adherent to this weird faith, and the local cult leader had used his position of authority to take liberties. He wouldn't be the first or last religious leader to try that. Temperance had violently rejected his advances, which should have come as a shock to no one, and had been kicked out of the hold in retaliation. It was a completely fucked up situation, made even worse because of Temperance's background. Unlike me or Jacob, Temperance was an old soul. Quite literally. She'd clipped into the backrooms in the late 1600s, during the height of the Salem witch trials. After being accused of witchcraft by her fiancé and sentenced to burn, she'd fled into the woods and had somehow ended up here. For her the backrooms weren't a curse, but a blessing. They'd saved her from certain death. Given her another shot at life. It wasn't hard to imagine why she might wind up with a cult like the Roomkeepers. She had trust issues for a good reason, and now she'd been betrayed again. Cast out of her community again. Croc, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, spoke up for the first time. "I've got to admit, I don't much like the sound of this Jackson fellow," the dog said. "First, he tried to hurt Temperance and now he's threatening to hurt you, Dan. I don't like it when people try to hurt my friends. Maybe it's not my place to say anything, but I'd like to float an idea. It seems to me that maybe the easiest thing to do is for me to sneak into the hold and just eat him." I sighed. "You can't eat him, Croc." "No, I absolutely could, Dan. Didn't you see how many of the hermit crabs I ate? There's no way this Jackson fellow is bigger than 15 dog-sized hermit crabs. There's just no way. I could sneak into wherever he lives, disguise myself as a chair, then just wait for him to sit down. A couple quick bites and the problem's all gone. I've even been working on my chair disguise." The mimic's form burbled and shifted. The rubbery blue dog was abruptly replaced by a blue wingback chair. An obvious mouth formed where the chair cushion met the frame and a pair of black buttons served as the mimic's eyes. Admittedly, it really did look more convincing than the last time Croc had revealed his chair form, but any delver with a working pair of eyes would see through the ruse. "Sorry, let me clarify," I corrected. "It's not a logistics question, Croc. I'm sure you could physically eat him. This is more of a moral question about whether you should eat him. And for the record the answer is that no, you should not eat him." "I don't know, I think the idea has real merit," Temperance said. Murder flashed in her eyes. "Would it truly be so awful to hear the dog out?" "Yes," Wraith and I both said at the same time. "Killing this guy will cause way more problems than it solves," I added. "But maybe we're making a mountain out of a molehill. You said Jackson and the other Roomkeepers are in the minority, right? Just how many are we talking?" "Less than a tenth of the hold follows the path," Wraith said quickly, "but those who do are zealots and consider my brother to be a prophet. Though, I should note, so you don't get the wrong idea, that Jackson isn't the founder of the Roomkeepers. Best I've been able to find, the religion was around for decades before he or I ever eclipsed. They have a presence in many of the major settlements, and rumor has it there's even a conclave of believers somewhere below the 800th floor." "And what about you?" I asked pointedly. "Any chance you're one of these Roomkeepers?" "No," Wraith replied, his face screwing up in evident disdain. "Jackson and I might be family, but I know who and what my brother is. He's a weasel. I've already come out in open support for an alliance with you, and I've made that stance publicly known. Personally, I think this could be a great opportunity for both of us. With direct access to your supplies, I could save countless lives. But much as I might want to, I can't just make a ruling here. Striking a deal with you is tantamount to declaring war against the Skilless Court," he continued. "If we do that, things will get ugly. It's doubtful the monarch will care enough to do something to us personally, but he'll almost certainly send his enforcers to set an example. The Red Hands are all aspirants, and they've already been sniffing around our territory, taking a poke at our security. Point is, I don't have the authority to make a decision like that on my own. Like it or not, it's a matter for the tribunal. Obviously, you have my vote, I wouldn't be here otherwise. But you need 2 of the 3 tribunes to rule in your favor, Jacob said. Exactly, Rafe replied, and even if Dan were the second coming of Backrooms Jesus, Jackson still wouldn't judge in his favor. What about the other guy you mentioned, Ajax? I asked. Where do his allegiances lie? With himself, Rafe said. Ajax isn't a bad man. Not exactly. He's competent, outgoing, and pragmatic. He's also selfish, self-centered, and a world-class degenerate of the highest magnitude. But most of all, he's a survivor. At the end of the day, he's going to do whatever is best for Ajax. Do you think we'll be able to persuade him? I asked. Persuade? Rafe replied, as though testing the word out. No. I think you might be able to bribe him, though. Like I said, he's very pragmatic. And by pragmatic, I mean corrupt. I've known him for the better part of 20 years, and he has all the moral integrity of a televangelist with a cocaine addiction. You've already got my vote, and if you can buy Ajax, you'll have all the votes you need to make our trade alliance official. If it all goes according to plan, you'll never even have to talk with Jackson. So what's the catch? I asked. Why do you think there's a catch? Rafe asked, quirking an eyebrow. Because there's always a catch, I said. Rafe grinned and he looked less like a bull and more like a wolf. You've got good instincts. He nodded in approval. That'll serve you well. The catch is that Ajax won't leave the hold. Not for any reason. He's our quartermaster and not a raider. He hasn't made it this long by taking risks and, make no mistake, coming here is a big risk. If you want to strike a bargain with Ajax, you're going to have to go to him. It's the only way. I can promise you safe passage while inside the hold, but you have to choose to trust me, and that's a gamble, too. I was silent for a moment while I mulled over my options. Paying a visit to the hold was probably a dumb idea, especially considering there was a non-insignificant portion of people there who wanted to murder me and or turn me over to the malevolent godlike deity looking to flay me alive. Unfortunately, Rafe was also right. I did need allies. As great as Croc, Jacob, and Temperance were, I was at war with a nation. I needed an army, not a fiery team. Working with others was always going to pose some risk, but the truth was, I liked Rafe. Yeah, he was a furry which kind of weirded me out, but he was also level-headed and seemed like a straight shooter. My tour gunner in Iraq, a guy named Wheeler, was into Japanese hentai so graphic I'm pretty sure transporting it across state lines constituted a war crime, but I'll be damned if he wasn't also the best Marine I'd ever known. Saved my ass more than once while running resupply routes through Fallujah. As long as Rafe made good on his promises, his personal life was none of my business. I was going to have to trust someone at some point, might as well be here and now. What the hell, I said, let's go see if we can't buy a little goodwill. Tope continued,